Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thank you for tuning in. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Layla, the Lenormand reader, and today folks we are doing our first Q&A video. So I'm really excited to start off this series. The way I'm seeing it right now is I expect to do this once a month, and so I'll be gathering your questions every so often and accumulating them for this video. I recently posted on the YouTube channel, the community section of the YouTube channel, asking you for your questions so that we have questions for this Q&A video. And I had a lot of questions coming up, so thank you so much for your enthusiasm. I'm so excited to see folks excited about Lenormand, and I'm so happy to be doing this video. So I've got a bunch of questions here that are listed under that post that I wrote on the community section. And so I'll just be taking them in turn, and I'm not going to make the video too long. And so what I'll do is I'll carry over some questions into the next video, and we will add to them. And as you might expect, some people have asked the same question. Now, the one thing that I want to answer right away, because I think it came up several times throughout different parts of, I guess, my YouTube career, my social media, and offline as well, like people writing to me. The first question that I want to answer is, what brought me to Lenormand? What got me reading to Lenormand? So a little bit of my backstory. So thank you so much for your curiosity about basically who I am with Lenormand and what brought me to it. So I was a student in university in Beirut, and I was a student of philosophy. And when I studied philosophy, a lot of things started to open up for me. Philosophy is a big deal. It's a wonderful science and art. And as a student, I was a lot more curious than others, than more regular students, if we can put it this way. And so I realized that philosophers talk a lot about mysterious things, and that modern day academia doesn't acknowledge that. So I started to read between the lines, and people like Descartes have been into things like the third eye and the pineal gland. Robert Boyle was an initiate in some esoteric group and things like that. So these philosophers had a lot of not regular, interests, but these were never addressed in academia. Like you would study the cogito with Descartes, like, the I think, therefore I am thing argument, which are the meditations of Descartes. But you never study things like that Descartes believed in the pineal gland. So I started to realize that there was more going on than meets the eye, and this led me, long story short, to explore, the occult, basically. So in the process of studying the occult, and I've done a lot of that, is reading tarot. So of course, like most of you out there, my beginnings with card reading was with tarot. So I'm well versed in the tarot. I read it fluently, like Lenormand. But then as I explored more decks, I landed on the Lenormand. I was in my favorite bookstore in Beirut, and I landed on Titania's fortune cards. So Titania's fortune cards is probably going to be my forever favorite deck. I no longer use it since I've created my own deck. It's a bit smaller, it's a bit more handy. So that was my beginnings with Lenormand. I bought that deck, I took it home, and the first thing I did was a 9-card portrait. I asked a question right off the bat, and I couldn't believe what I got. I was asking about a relationship, and I got an incredible set of cards. It was just like, I didn't need to open the book. I didn't need to look up the card meanings. It was just in my face. It was so obvious that I was immediately hooked. So that was my beginning with Lenormand, and I have to say that within, I would say, a few months to a year maybe, I started to drift away from all the other divination methods I was dabbling with, including the tarot, which by the time I had probably, you can say I had mastered it. And I was just hooked to Lenormand. And from there, I started to read a lot about Lenormand. I struggled a lot with the variety that's out there. There is variety, but it's a bit skinny, right? Because Lenormand is a much smaller group than the tarot. So I've decided to really take the practice into my hands and to create my own body of knowledge around it, which culminated into the master course that I offer you. So this is my backstory with Lenormand. If you have more questions about it, be sure to leave them, and maybe I'll pick them up in the next Q&A. So thanks again for your curiosity about me and my background. I'm very happy to share it. Let's move on to your questions about Lenormand. So Tam Winter asks, what does it mean when you have good cards, but the last card on the right is negative? Is that the good stuff that will be taken away somehow? I get confused with this one. Thank you. Yes, this is a typical issue with Lenormand if you read the cards as a story from left to right. It doesn't have to be an issue if you don't read them from left to right. So for example, if you read the central card as the outcome and the central card is positive but the right one isn't, then it's not really an issue, right? Then the outcome is positive, but then the right hand side card would suggest that, well, there's an issue along the way. But if you do read the left to right thing with the right being more focused on the outcome, then yes, it can mean that there is a positive prospect, but then something comes up. I'm going to publish a video of an I Interpret Your Cards video. This too is a new series, so be sure to stay tuned. And I read someone else's cards, and her cards has that configuration issue where, it all looks good, but then the outcome cards are a bit, tricky. They're a bit negative. So they sort of throw a wrench into this positive unfolding. So be sure to check that video out because it's a good example of the question that you're asking and the issue that comes up. So yes, it does happen. Things work out well, and then there are issues. And the thing about this is that it happens in life. Sometimes things work out and then we hit obstacles. Now, if there are obstacles down the line, it doesn't mean that it's the end of the story with this situation. It doesn't mean that it's an ending. It's just that it's giving you within the coming timeline that there's going to be an obstacle. Now, one tip in relation to this is with past, present, and futures, the readings, the timeline is set by the past. So some people read the past card as giving a clue about how far into the future you're looking at. So how far into the past you're being given by the cards is how far into the future you're looking into. So within this time horizon, there could be an issue that pops up, but what I mean to say is that it doesn't mean that it's the end of the world with this situation. It just means that there's an issue down the line and you're going to have to deal with it, and this is perfectly fine, and this is part of life, and there's no need to dread it, okay? I know sometimes we dread the negative cards, but you know what? Challenges are part of life, and we want our cards to reflect that so that we can actually prepare for something. I think that's the point of reading cards. So I hope this is a satisfactory answer, Tam. I think it's yes, it is tricky. Let me know your thoughts if you have any more. Okay, moving on to the next question. I have Alpha Andromeda, who asked me a bunch of questions in the in this Q&A prompt. So I'm going to go for a few of them, and I think some of them also pours into other questions by other people. So Alpha says, can you touch upon how to ask the correct questions in order to get correct answers? I think this is a very wise question because, as they say, the question is half the answer. So, and actually this is true in science as well, believe it or not. The hypothesis that you set out to test in a scientific experiment is almost half the answer, and there's a lot of prejudice actually and bias that can come from how you set up the question. So the question you ask is really important. I do have a blog post about good questions you can ask Lenormand or with your Lenormand deck, and I'm going to link this somewhere up here or down here. But to answer you, Alpha, I think the better questions are the ones that tap into your sense of free will. They tap into the idea of what you can do about the situation. Now, I think, to be fair, we do read cards because we want to know something, and I think that is totally fine. We want to be able to predict something. So yes, it is fair to ask for insights about the future, about the situation, things that are hidden try to get them through the cards. So I think that is totally fine. But I think in general, you want to gear your question in a way that you actually get something useful out of it. Because if there's nothing you can do about it, then what's the point of asking? And if you spend time with me, with my practice, you will hear me say this over and over. So to sum it up, I think the best questions are the ones that you can also use to get guidance from, so that you know where you stand relative to a situation and what you can do about it. I hope this makes sense. Let me know, Alpha, if you have, more questions around this specific question. Your next question, Alpha, is a good one, I think. Alpha says, could you tell us more about how you would choose the different spreads to answer different kinds of questions? This is really interesting, and I've had one student in our private group ask specifically about how to do a past life reading with Lenormand. And I came up with something, with something creative. I think I told him that you could use was it the multi-question readings? You can see those on my private reading menu. You have the 3-question and the 5-question spread. You can use these to answer this question, like different streams, if you like, in relation to your past life. But the thing about Lenormand, and I want to say this, is that any layout answers any question. And this is very specific about Tableau-Style Layouts. I'm about to publish a video about Tableau-Style Layouts as well, so check this one out. The thing about Lenormand is that you can use a portrait to answer any question. You can use a line of 7 to answer any question. Why? Because in Lenormand, you read the whole story through the cards. Whereas in other methods, like the tarot, specific card positions answer specific areas of the question. So for example, the horseshoe spread, you've got past, present, future, obstacle, other people, best course of action, and outcome. You don't have that in Lenormand. You don't have the idea that a specific card position answers a specific part of the question. It's not really like that. Yes, you can assign lines to these areas, but it's optional. You don't have to. So if you want to read, for example, about past lives, you can very broadly ask, what does my past life involve? One thing that my past life involves, or one thing you need to focus on now that is connected to one of your past lives, and you can just do a portrait. And the central card will bring up the focus, and the surrounding cards will bring up the details. So that's the thing about Lenormand, is that you can pretty much use any spread for any question. It comes down to the amount of detail that you want. And how much information you want out of your readings. So if you want like a short, answer, you would do a simple line, a simple cross, or even a portrait. And if you want something more, you would do a portrait, an extended portrait, a mini tableau, or even a grand tableau. So it depends on how much detail you want out of your readings. I hope this makes sense. Okay. And Alpha again says, someone mentioned it below, the order of the cards affects the way we interpret them. So she says, mice and Clover isn't as negative as Clover and mouse. So we just answered this earlier when Tam was asking, what happens when there's a negative card at the end. So I hope this makes sense. And yes, mice and Clover is more positive than Clover and mice. But I would say because the Clover is so powerfully positive, I feel that here, Clover and mice, it has this preventative kind of protection thing. Like you're going to be protected from losses down the line. I think it's possible to see this specific combination this way. Maybe if it weren't the Clover, it would have been a bit different. So it depends on the combination. Alpha, I might pick up this combination for one of our card combination readings. Let's stay tuned for that. Okay, moving on to another question. I have here Teresa Armstrong asking, is it possible to see timing in the cards? Yes, more or less. Timing is probably the hardest thing to predict across all methods, all divination methods, everything from crystal balls to cards to runes to geomantic methods. Timing is really, really tricky in all of prediction and even prophecy, for those of you who are connected with, biblical prophecy and things like that. So what, the prophecy people, for example, do they don't work through timing, they work through the sequence of events. So they take, the signs as happening in certain sequence, and then they're able to, to anticipate the next thing that's going to happen, like for example, in biblical prophecy, for example. With cards, yes, with Lenormand specifically, you can assign a timing value, if you like, to each of the cards. And I do that. And I call these assignments, I call them correspondences. And I think there's going to be another question in relation to correspondences coming up. So bear with me on this one. Correspondences, as far as I'm concerned, or the way I define it, is the idea that a card can mean different things for different contexts. So when it comes to timing, such and such card might have such and such timing. Now, you can expect that it's never precise and that it's really rough, but you can come up with things like faster cards, slower cards. So for example, the Rider and Clover, they're faster cards. The Ship are probably longer cards. The Tower, even longer. The Mountain, pretty much stuck. The Coffin, well, probably waiting for some time, right? So from the essence of the cards, you can get a sense of the timing. But to say that you can be specific with timing is probably a lie. I think, just to be honest about this, I think if anyone tells you they can predict timing really precisely, I don't think that's true. Numerology might be good with this. Horoscopes and anything zodiac related, related to the stars, can be better with this. And so what I suggest we do with cards, whether it's Lenormand or anything else, any other card method, is to embed your timeline within the question. So I think the best practice is to say, well, am I going to get the job within the next 6 months to a year? So embed the timeline within the question. That will make it easier to time box your reading. And then when time comes, you can reset the question and ask again. So that's my suggestion and my answer to you. I hope this makes sense, Teresa. Okay, moving on to Nina Jade. Nina says, can you do a compare and equivalence between Lenormand and Tarot in terms of cards, like, for example, what cards in Lenormand are equivalent, like the Star or the Tower, the Three of Cups, and so on? And what are the differences in the purpose between the two decks? So, Nina, I'm going to take this up as a separate video series. It's interesting you bring it up, and I'm delighted you bring it up, actually, because I've had this in mind for a while. And the reason is because many of us come to Lenormand from a tarot background, and so we might think like, okay, well, what would be the Three of Cups in Lenormand? What would be the Six of Swords in Lenormand? How would you read this in tarot? So we can maybe do a fun video series about how to translate tarot to Lenormand. But what I want to add to this is how to speak Lenormand in general. So you can take newspaper headlines and translate them into Lenormand. Lenormand is a language, and the idea is, well, how do you translate events in the world, anything really, into these cards? So I want to take this up in a video series, so stay tuned for it. Okay, and the other part of Nina's question is, she said, I had a reader once telling me that Lenormand is best to read evil eye or dark energies. Nina, I've answered this on the comment section itself, but I'll make a comment of it here. I'm not really into evil eye and dark energies, and I'm sorry if this comes across as off. My spiritual practice is more about affirmations. So I've hopefully there'll be an opportunity for me to bring my affirmations work to the table, but I've done massive healings in my life through affirmations, and I don't need anyone to tell me what the miracle is about, with all due respect, because I have first-hand experience with this. And so I feel that through the affirmations work, you're able to realize that yes, there are forces in the world. Obviously, there are bigger things that operate, but we also have a huge say in what we attract into our vortex. Let's put it this way. So I feel that to say something like Lenormand is best to read evil eye or dark energies. I'm not even sure what that means. Like, Lenormand is a really practical deck that you can use for anything you focus on. If you are concerned about maybe something dark or negative coming your way, then by all means do a spread about it. But Lenormand is going to help you be practical, and I really think that's the advantage. I think this is a huge topic. I don't think we need to, I think if we get too much into it for the purpose of this video, we're gonna go off on a tangent. So if you have more questions about these topics and you think we should talk about them, and you want to know my thoughts about these things, then by all means leave me the questions. And what I'll do is we'll accumulate them into a bit of a separate kind of topic, because it's not so much about card reading, it's more about our bigger philosophy around these things. Okay, moving on to Kay Nelson's question. Kay Nelson asks, I'm wondering how you determine yes and no answers to questions. With Lenormand, this is actually super easy for two reasons. Two features about the Lenormand cards. The first one is that Lenormand's cards are very easily categorized into positive, negative, or neutral cards. And I recently did a video about this. I'm going to link it, so have a look at it. And so a positive card answers a yes, a negative card answers a no, and a neutral card doesn't really answer it, although it might if the theme is aligned with your question. So for example, if you ask something like, are you going to get news from Paul, and you get the letter? So the letter is a neutral card. So from this perspective, it's neither a yes or a no, but the letter is very much about news. So it would answer your question as a yes, just because the theme is really well aligned with your question. Does that make sense? And the other feature about Lenormand's cards that help answer yes or no questions is the pip cards. So the hearts, the spades, the clubs, and the diamonds have associations with them, in terms of yes, no, maybe, and so on. I can get into this another day, but they're also covered in the course, and also in the master guides if you don't want to take the course. So you might want to check this out for yes or no answers. But we can get into the details of the pips maybe another day. I want to add a little side note about yes or no questions. I think they are a bit limiting. So yes, obviously, I read a lot, and I've asked a million questions throughout my life, and many of them are yes or no questions. We're gonna ask yes or no questions. I just want to say that, don't overlook the other messages that the cards might bring to the table, like good advice, good things to be aware of. Just take away some guidance, not just a straight yes or no. And also, don't take a formulaic approach to yes or no. So for example, my issue with using the pip cards, and that's why I don't really like to spend time on it, because I don't like to give it that much importance, is that it becomes really formulaic. It becomes like a formula. Like if it's reds and this and that, then it's yes. Well, I don't think so, right? You have to look at the cards. You have to interpret the question and the cards in light of the question. You're getting insight out of the cards. So there's no like this black and white approach that is really prone with yes or no questions. So I hope this makes sense, and you approach these questions with a broader context. Okay, here's another question by Alpha Andromeda, and she asks, can we talk a little about how one approaches a Grand Tableau? I don't think so. This is a really big topic, and I think it's best that I take this away into a dedicated video, because the Grand Tableau is the master spread that everyone aspires to. But you know what, Alpha, I do have, I believe I have a blog post about how to approach the Grand Tableau. So I'm going to link this. I'm going to link this for you either here or in the description. So check this out and get started with the blog post. And then we'll meet again in another video dedicated to the Grand Tableau another day. Okay, moving on to Merete. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how you say that. Merete Jensen. So she's from Denmark. So I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. And she says, I want to know about your journey into Lenormand. So I answered that, Merete. Thank you so much for your interest. I answered it at the outset of the video. She says how I got to the point of doing it professionally. I didn't talk about that in my backstory. She says, I read with both Lenormand and Tarot, and I've always wondered how you decided to only read with Lenormand. So I've started to read professionally since I think when I was a student, I would read professionally. So I would do this part time, and then I started working, and I would still do this part time until so a little bit before I kicked off my channel and then kicked off the full course. I started to do this a lot more seriously. And then since COVID, I've been on this full time. So I do other things in life as well. But since COVID, I spend a lot of time on this. I do other things in my life. I like a lot of variety, and I deal with other topics like the affirmation thing. I'm also a Feng Shui certified practitioner. I'm into yoga. I do different things in my life, and so I spend time on these as well. Now, how I decided to focus on Lenormand and not tarot, it's entirely a personal preference. So when I started to practice Lenormand, it's completely absorbed me, and I felt that I just wanted to use this deck. So it's completely a personal preference. If you do both, and I know a lot of practitioners do, and sometimes they have these really interesting ways of combining the decks, just do your thing. It's important that you are a unique reader, and what you bring to the table is it aligns with you, and that is perfectly fine, and don't let anyone judge you. Okay, let's move on to another question. This one is by Vasiliki. Vasiliki asks, how we interpret cards that do not resonate with the theme. So for example, the fish card in a love question. Vasiliki, this is a great question, and this is about correspondences, which I mentioned a little bit earlier. So in Lenormand, you can interpret any card for any question. And the card meaning that is, let's say, stretched for that context, I call the correspondence. Now, a card in Lenormand has a main theme. So when I teach the course, I distinguish between two things. I distinguish between the main theme of the card and the card correspondences. So the main theme of the fish card, for example, is yes, it's mainly about money. But this doesn't mean that we can't interpret the fish for health, for money, for timing, for advice, for spiritual purposes. Any card in Lenormand can be stretched and flexed to make sense of any context. So you would use the essence of the card and expand that into a specific context. So for example, the fish is the card of money. It is also associated with masculinity. It is associated with men's health, and also with anything related to water. So it tends to be associated with the urinary system, fluids and things like that. And so when it comes to love, the fish card is often associated with the physical aspect of a relationship, and a lot of happiness normally in this regard. Unless there are negative cards next to the fish is usually quite powerful in this sense. So that's how I interpret the fish in the context of love, and that is the correspondence of the fish in the context of love. So I hope, Vasiliki, this makes sense. Okay, let's move on to a few more questions. I'm half hour in. So I have another question here by Tam Winter. And the question is, I have had heart, clover, and tower. And then for a different question, I had fox, birds, and tower. Does the tower change meaning? Is the tower talking about the past? All chances are yes. Probably the tower has a different meaning for different questions. Now, I don't know what your questions were, Tam, so you might like to circle back and maybe give me some more context. You can also send me these cards for a reading where I interpret your cards. I think that would be a good idea. So I'm going to rewrite to you. It's been 3 weeks, but if you're still up for it, then let me know. But just to answer you briefly here, yes, in all probability, the tower is going to mean different things in different contexts, especially cards like the tower, because neutral cards like the tower, they don't have a really powerful or standout meaning like, say, the clover or the ring. They're a bit more mute, and they can mean different things in different contexts. So heart, clover, and tower. The clover and tower probably means a long patch of good luck. So the idea that you're going to be protected over the longer term. And then when you have something like the Bird's End Tower in your second triplet, and I'm reading the pairs, right? I'm reading the cards closest to the tower. The Bird's End Tower suggests a conversation with someone in authority. That's how I would take the combination to mean. So you've got two triplets here, Tam, and what you want to do is you want to string the pairs. And in my card combination master, I detail every single card combination meaning. So if you're interested in that, you might like to check out the card combination master. I'll link it here, wherever I have space to fit it. Okay. Angie asks, is it possible to ask yes/no questions with Lenormand cards? Yes, and I've answered this earlier. Let's see. The Love Oracle Tarot asks, how can you get more from the Lenormand deck? Like, how do you go deeper? Is it the cards or the deck? Is it the reader? Is it the reading? I think this is a really interesting question. And I think I can see where people who read tarot come from, or, who read oracle cards come from, because the Lenormand deck, it is just so practical. It seems like it doesn't deal with spiritual issues. Now, it might be premature for me to share this if we all are still building our Lenormand, our Petit Lenormand skills. But Mademoiselle Lenormand has another deck called the Grand Lenormand. And this is a very complex deck. So I'm working through the Grand Lenormand. It's really premature to do anything deep about it. I think we should all get our heads around the Petit Lenormand first. But it is that deck that would be something similar to, say, the major arcana of the tarot. Okay, now that aside, okay, so just teasing you with some more interesting decks out there. But that aside, yes, of course, you can use the Lenormand deck to go deeper. First of all, it's up to you what question you ask. Second, because the Lenormand deck is so flexible, you can associate spiritual correspondences to the Lenormand cards. And I do that in the card combination master because I really care about the soul journey, my experience with affirmation, healing, all of that. So I really care about, well, how does that support your growth? How do the cards support your journey? What do they tell you about it? So I do offer spiritual correspondences for each of the Lenormand cards. Again, it's in the Card Combination Master. The Master is the book where I dive deep into the meaning of the cards and the card combinations. So to the Love Oracle Tarot, you might like to check it out. Again, it's linked somewhere here or here. Okay, and the last question, I'm very glad I got through all of them. Connor asks, what deck is the purple deck? So I think, Connor, you're referring to this deck. So the purple deck is my deck, okay? I have to apologize again and again. I have not been able to make my deck available yet. Since COVID broke out, I've been traveling, and I just have a hard time ordering samples to finalize the quality of the deck that I want to put out there. And also, I was thinking about Amazon and other places where I can do the deck, but it's getting complicated and also pricey. And, so I'm not going to order big quantities to start with. And so this means I'm going to have to price up the deck a little bit, and it's going to be more than the average deck. So I'm thinking through all of these, logistical kind of questions. And so so in parallel, I'm working on alternative solutions. So maybe not ordering decks up front, maybe print on demand kind of formats. So I'm still looking through that. So I'm very sorry if a number of you have been wanting my deck. I really appreciate the support and the kind feedback about it. I'm going to keep working toward this. I'm going to keep working towards making it happen. Just please be patient with me through these complicated times. I appreciate the feedback. Just a little bit about my deck. I really like, I'm a minimalist in my life. So I like, I like sharpness. I like to see the symbol clearly on the card. And it also comes from the fact that I've used Titania's fortune cards for the longest time. And they're also, bright and big and really clear. it's very different from when you read, the Petit Lenormand, the traditional ones, the blue owl and the red owl. They don't appear well on camera. They're kind of small. They have a lot of detail in them. So the symbol sort of is lost a little bit in the detail. And I don't think it helps with, like connecting with the symbols more immediately. So Connor, thanks again for your patience with me. I'm working to make it happen. And thank you to all of you also who have asked about the deck. So this wraps up this Q&A. I'm so glad. I think I got through all of them. If there are more questions, leave them here. And I'm probably going to prompt you again soon enough for the next Q&A next month. So thanks so much for tuning in, folks. And I'm so looking forward to our next time together. Take very good care of yourself.